Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for joining me to watch this talk on togethering. If you've ever wondered about the impacts that we have as educators, both in EAP and ICC, then I hope this presentation will convince you that some of the foundational steps into academia that EAP often represents, and the critical importance of ICC as a building block of global citizenship and cultural literacy, will leave you feeling inspired to explore this idea of togethering a little bit further and think about consciously including it in your practice. My name is Cathy. I'm a lecturer at Oxford Brookes University. I run the Foundation ICC and Global Issues modules, and I also teach on environmentally sustainable business. And I want to take you through some of the threads of my educator journey from EFL to EAP to ICC, and where I sit now as a practitioner in education for sustainability. So, my educator journey began 30 years ago as a freshly trained CELTA teacher, excited to develop and explore what I saw as a rich teacher training course full of travel possibilities. Over many years in Spain, I became very engaged with EFL methodologies. So, for example, core tenets of language teaching being communicative language approaches, collaborative student-centered tasks, scaffolding learners, so that zone of proximal development, formative learning, so the idea, that growth mindset, the idea of it's okay to get things wrong on the way to getting things right. That's so much a part of English language teaching. Also, this notion of looking at lowering affective filters, making sure everyone's comfortable and stress-free to learn in a language, learn a new language and in a language learning environment. So this respecting of difference was really important. I was also aware of some of the cultural restrictions in ELT when I came to writing teaching materials. So parsnips, that you'll see this picture may or may not be familiar to you, but back in the day, writing ELT materials, there were some taboo subjects, and P stands for politics, A was for alcohol, R was for religion, S was for sex, N was for narcotics, I was for ideologies, believe it or not, and P was for pork. So all of those areas were deemed off limits and taboo for writing textbook materials for students. However, the abilities and the experience that I gained, I think, were really formative in my EAP practice. And in many ways, those core tenets of English language teaching and what many educators come to from into EAP from language teaching backgrounds bring with them. So EAP, my next journey into EAP was when I came to Brookes in 2009, and I felt that I was developing those EFL skills, but orientating students' learning towards the goals of engaging and culturally settling into their new academic environment. So this involved academia as a culture, the idea of a culture having a language, so appropriacy of the language used, of register, of academic conventions, in terms of structure, how we structure an argument or counter arguments, rebuttals, and the all-important referencing and plagiarism work that we do with students in EAP courses often. Expectations were also really important to lay out for the students. So what communicative expectations, so how to communicate in a seminar or a tutorial, and learner autonomy, that idea of being an autonomous learner and participating in work. So often these are the very first steps in critical thinking and perspective taking that students have, very different from the EFL work. And this idea of students being able to students as producers, being able to really contribute to a body of knowledge was exciting. So the links from EAP to ICC, where I moved next, were also seemed like very strong threads to me. So ICC is a central priority for academic success in any discipline area at university level. And indeed, it supports many of our university's strategic aims of employability, equality, diversity and inclusion, global citizenship, entrepreneurship. So ICC skills are really critical in all of these areas, with the main goal of better understanding human relations and approaches to global challenges. So our course at Brookes, our Foundation ICC course, uses Sadri and Flamia as a sort of base text, and they look at this idea of ICC being a new approach to international relations that values the past, so looks at some of those elements of colonialism and extractivist activities that still impact on the present, and understanding the present is looking at themes around language and identity and stereotyping, social class, those sorts of things, but also very much orientated to preparing for the future. So looking at the purpose of learning. Intercultural competence is absolutely foundational to the course, and we spend a lot of time. This theme is woven through most of the sessions that we look at. So here, students have a chance to identify and critique biases, particularly those that other or discriminate or reinforce deficit or negative narratives. And students are asked to reflect deeply on their own and others' cultural identities. So this is very much part of what my discipline area is now, Education for Sustainable Development. And if I share this quote with you from UNESCO, you'll see how the threads of EAP and ICC are absolutely foundational to the success of the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is the aim of SDG 4.7, quality education, which you can read for yourself there, is that by all learners by 2030 will have acquired the skills and knowledge needed to promote sustainable development. But you'll see at the end here that the appreciation of cultural diversity and culture's contribution to sustainable development is absolutely key. So the next thing I'd like to show you within this idea of togethering, to try and present this idea of togethering, is the ICC new video assignment that the students were asked to do as their assessment on the module. So it's based in Freire's praxis-based ideas of using theory and applying it to individuals' own lived experiences. So the idea of it being emancipatory, of bringing theory into an area that students can really understand. So they apply these theories for the 3 to 5 minute video they need to make to their own experiences. They use Tajfel's social identity theory, Allport's theory of prejudice, and the very well-known Hall's cultural iceberg. And they use these to reflect on common stereotypes, prejudices, stereotyping, and othering in their own cultural landscapes. Critically, and what was different about this assignment is it also asked students to really look for similarities as well as differences within their cultural identities. So Tajfel's social identity asked students to look at this idea of in and out groups and to use that in their own areas and to see where they felt they might have favoritism towards a group or less favorable approaches to other groups. So this key theory allows students to look at the ideas of groups, in groups and out groups in their own experience then. The other theories that we asked them to look at concerned elephants, icebergs, and ladders. So elephants, we show this picture and ask students to say how many legs the elephant has, to which, of course, the majority of them say 4, because that's what they're expecting to see. So we use this as a metaphor to describe how the mind uses bias as a shorthand, sometimes a necessary shorthand to cut through a lot of information, and that this comes from a survival mechanism. And we also use Hall's cultural iceberg to talk about how lots of this is below the iceberg, below the water level, and is largely unconscious. But we discuss this notion of whether prejudice leads to discrimination or not. So that Allport's theory of prejudice is one that students actively explore. And the ladder of prejudice is also a way that students are able to look at the different levels of prejudice and othering that they might see in the world around them. Here's a slide that we use in one of the sessions to outline some images to outline this idea of othering and racism, these negative and discriminatory problems that students will come across in their own lives and have seen, particularly with the Black Lives Matter over COVID, and some of the debates around racism in football and the LGBTQ plus community. Here you can see images from New Zealand, the shootings in Christchurch in New Zealand, where students are comforting the Muslim ladies who've been so badly affected by this terrible massacre. So students have a look at these images and discuss how they feel about them. Having introduced these different ideas and asked students to create these videos, what was surprising with some of the student submissions, we had about 160 of them altogether. The interesting thing was that they focused very much on themes that were a little bit different from what we were expecting in many ways from some of these theories, and suggest perhaps a different framing that we ought to think about in the course. So I'm just going to play you a few minutes of some of the clips from different student assignments so you can get a flavour of what the students produced.
Hello, my name is Sabrina, and this exhibit is a collage of different students' work on the Foundation's Intercultural Communication module from the new video assignment titled My Cultural Identity. They show reflections and expressions of our myriad of diverse cultural identities. We hope you enjoy watching them as much as we did making them, and that you can feel the celebration of diversity and inclusivity they showcase.
When we move to a new environment, we meet new people, introduce ourselves, talk about anything that we like, and try to get to know each other. Basically, we ask, where are you from in that situation? Now we live in diverse society, so I think this question doesn't suit recent years. Who are you? I think this is the question to get to know another person.
I believe that our individual cultural identity exists as a collection of our experiences and our views. My name is Harry Charles Eccleston. I was born in Tooting, London, to parents of both Caribbean and European descent. London is a melting pot of cultures, creeds and subcultures. I was brought up without religion and encouraged to ask questions, express creativity and embrace uncertainty. This ingrained within me a deep love for soul music.
When thinking about my cultural identity, the first thing I thought of was my accent. An accent I could never hear myself that didn't have a noticeable reason behind it, considering I was never once surrounded by any people or media of any relation.
If I could describe a Lao person with just one word, it would be easygoing. We tend to not take things seriously. You know, kind of lighthearted. As people, we're willing to let bygones be bygones, and are very forgiving. In the Lao language, we have a phrase that encapsulates this kind of attitude very well.
บ่เป็นหยัง บ่เป็นหยัง
His son is forcing me to film this for him, but บ่เป็นหยัง
Bopinyang. It translates to it's okay. For me and a lot of people, it's more than just a word. It's a sort of lifestyle or mentality that I try to keep with me. As people, we'll have conflict with one another. To that, I'll say, Bopinyang. Made a mistake, Bopinyang. This phrase alone defines not only me, but many other people you will encounter here in Lao.
We must gradually train ourselves to put seeing others as others, to start viewing them as human. Don't judge people before know them. I hope that everyone will less be stereotypical and biased. We are all different, and that is amazing. When someone asks me, where are you from? I'm gonna say, I'm from Earth.
In closing, I am aware that there is an implicit perception of my cultural identity based on my appearance, sense of fashion, taste in music, patterns of speech, and so on. It is noteworthy then that these aspects are all subconsciously informed by my flexible attitudes that come from the desire to not be categorized into any particular group.
Lao is home. It was where I was born, where I was raised, and will probably be the place where my body lays. Being surrounded by a Lao family gave me the love and respect of the Lao culture, along with the pride that I hold for being Lao. However, there is another side of me that isn't Lao, one that enjoys interacting with foreigners, and a side of me that is willing to walk into the unknown. It is a side of me that is foreign for my family, but one unique to me. I'm not Lao, but I am Lao.
My cultural identity is not a horse rider, not a dancer or a student. My cultural identity is a Belarusian who wants to be free.
Глаза в слезах, вся любовь, горит земля под ногами. Так и не увидят воли.
I think the key learning that we took away from it was that students often identify similarities, so universal qualities of empathy. The student who danced her Belarusian identity, for example, here were some of the facets that they picked out that came up again and again in the different videos. So this idea of belonging to social family, to groups, to activities, the idea that everyone needs love and understanding and values. A deep desire to change biases and prejudice, othering and racism. So lots of students referred to instances of this within their own culture and how they would like those to be changed. And also, as you heard in some of those clips, the feeling of being misunderstood, of being pigeonholed in a box or reduced to a particular identity. So this idea of resisting cultural assumptions and categories and descriptions. And lots of them, as well as you've seen in some of the clips here, identified music and dance and art, empathy and humour, really positive facets of the things that make us all human. So my question today, my tentative question today, is to present this idea of how do we, as ICC practitioners, how do we present cultural identity? So we don't talk about intracultural communication, we talk about intercultural communication. So this idea that many of the theories and ideas we give students make distinctions between groups. They identify boundaries, separations, distinctions. They look through a lens, perhaps, or my premise is they look through a lens very much of contrast rather than similarity. And so if we look at some of these examples here, so we talk about native and non-native teachers, huge debates around there, collectivist versus individualist, or home and international students. Couldn't we have intranational students, for example? So this idea as well of culture being bounded and polarized, rather than fluid or a spectrum of different things. culture as identity, rigid, a box. Could it not be more negotiable, more emergent? And so I'm borrowing here from an idea in sustainability, which is a lady called Isabel Romanowski has written a book called The Sustainability Mindset Principles. And she talks a lot about this idea of, instead of having either or, to have both and more. So the idea of approaching identity and culture in a different way. And this quote from Crenshaw shows that people from social categories are not the same. So the identity of the group, she claims, has been centered on intersectional identities of just a few. Next week of the course, we have a video screening where we show many of the student videos, and we share this clip.
There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn? Hvem er bonusforældre?
And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
So moving on to my last slide is just this quote from John Powell, who works at the Othering and Belonging Institute at the University of California. So many of the ideas that have led up to and informed this idea of togethering have come from this wonderful, I urge you to, I've put a link here, so I urge you to follow this up. There's so many really, really inspiring materials there. But he talks about the problem of othering is the problem of the 21st century and the possible demise of the nation state and planet as we know it. So it really brings together there how important this area of ICC is. Sorry. So my final questions are, could togethering support this approach? Could togethering support the idea of belonging? And could a more mindful framing of culture and identity within intercultural communication be a good thing to reflect on as ICC practitioners? And if we reflect on how we present these foundational framings, so a lot of the theories focus on the negative or the more negative aspects of culture, of prejudice, of othering, of stereotyping. Do we need to also balance those with other more positive, aspirational elements for our students so that they can see the changes that they want, and they can see the changes that they want to work towards. So very last of all, I wanted to share with you just the thanks for my team who taught on ICC with me. So Dana Wentworth, my co-module lead, and the other tutors that you can see on the slide here, all of whom gave lectures on different areas of ICC, and to all of the students. Many of the videos that you saw were made in lockdown, and students who didn't have the chance to actually join us in the UK made their videos from abroad and shared them with us. So thank you very much indeed for your time and for listening. And I hope you've enjoyed learning about this idea of togethering.